I lay under a tall oak tree, asked the tree to shelter me. She wrapped me up in an ancient green, ancient green. I lay under a tall oak tree, asked the tree to shelter me. She wrapped me up in an ancient green, ancient green.
So I think I will take the floor for girls, yeah, or because they asked me to be an interpreter today, translator of, and just to tell shortly what they prepared for the meeting, because they are a bit stressed out and they are not really sure about their English. So I will take for it, but everything I say is what they wrote and what we together translated. So yeah, just to begin with, maybe you girls, you want to present yourself, who you are or not, or it's to me, it's on me. Okay, so I will start with Agata. Agata is a psychotherapist, psychodramatist, and for many years she has been working at the theater, at the playback theater, as a director with various excluded social groups. Her most important project was a theater for people experiencing mental illnesses, with whom she worked for 15 years. She created, together with Magda, and played some together with the groups, and played some nice performances. Now she is absorbed by most by their playback theater 3.0, which they developed basing on new original ideas brought by their experience. Magda is also a psychotherapist, also a psychodramatist, and she is also a director. In her professional work, she combined these three areas together, and she has always worked with groups, leading group therapy and theater collectives. While working in her first profession as a director, she focused on a social theater, and that's why probably we are here. She has worked with prisoners in prisons and with people with intellectual disabilities. Now she is mainly concerned with social exclusion related to mental illnesses, refugees, and human rights violations, um, which we're gonna talk a lot. I'm gonna elaborate on that later on. She has been creating playback theater with Agata together since 2016, and now this is her greatest inspiration. So now to describe the work of Playback 3.0 Theater, the theater that Magda and Agata create together. The Playback Theater 3.0 was created as the first such theater in Poland about 4.5 years ago. The founders of the theater, are Magda and Agata, and they create the basis for the activity. They invite various interesting people to cooperate with them. And the activities are a response to various social topics, often hard to be accepted by others, such as the problems with refugees, which was made in the Exilium project, then the problem of perceiving sexual minorities and women rights in Poland. Additionally, a group has been established in Poland to support people fighting for their rights in Belarus. Help is dedicated to people who work with people who were arrested and tortured during after electional protest, which started in August 2020, and they still go on until today. This work combines supervision, advice on how to work with people who are experiencing traumas, and proposal of Magda and Agata for work with these people was exactly listening hours. As it is difficult to get the group together.
Albert, let me interrupt. Please don't talk too fast, because many people listening have English as second or third language. Yes, you don't need to rush.
No problem. I'm just a bit stressed that it's gonna be too long, so that's why I just get faster and faster, but I will try to be slower. So to sum up what I just said, we just have this three or four main areas of work, so refugees, sexual minorities and women's rights, and also current Belarusian protest and helping people who support the protesters. And after the training about listening hours, they started to use this format first during meetings for friends and to work with a group of young people. Then they started experimenting using listening hours for other activities in response to specific social problems. They started to extend it with other means, in their opinion, supporting, developing, and helping the topic and the entire idea of listening hours. In this way, the free spaces were created in which they can move using listening hours. And yeah, we are going to elaborate on that later on. The topics that we focused, I already mentioned them four main topics, so refugees, Ukrainian migrants, especially in Poland, also supporting psychologists from Belarus and problems of women rights and sexual minorities. Also, there was one project with young people living in constant isolation. First, an online space for contacts between friends and people gathering around one topic. This was the basic way of applying, of implementing listening hours in the work of Magda and Agata. After the first training, the first I think I was kicked off.
You're back.
Yeah, I'm back. So I don't know what you heard, but okay. What was the last thing you heard? I hope I will start with, so I will just go a bit to the past. So the first meeting focused on the topic that touched all of Poland in the beginning of summer. Our president called LGBT people that they were not human, that they were ideology and not human. And Magda and Agata invited participants to the like people connected to this event and to this group to listening hours on this topic. At the beginning of the meeting, they decided to introduce a short theater scene introducing the topic. And as an effect, it opened a lot of associations that caused the participants to go towards the general topic of isolation, and not only that of LGBT people in Poland, but also the isolation of like general isolation of us, of all of us during the pandemic. And it was important for them to show the people who don't agree on the importance of certain topic as isolation or LGBT rights in the country, to find a part of themselves in it and check whether they are really so different and whether they don't have similar problems each other. It is only possible to do so, but to do this by letting someone's story get through you. That's the best thing that really hits our hearts. So this happened. People united with and excluded LGBT people by telling a story of their own isolation. In this case, the isolation occurred during the pandemic period and closure lockdown of the economy. Girls used this online forum during a meeting with people from Ukraine who talked about their longing for the country and about their history of migration to Poland. The stories told had a special expression due to the pandemic, the lack of precise information on data and the situation in Ukraine. And during the meeting, we noticed that for people who live in a foreign country, the cultural aspect related to art is very important. And people participating in the meeting, they spoke about the fact that they are missing the national anthem. So during the meeting, girls included elements of patriotic music, of folk music of Ukraine in the meeting, so that to make it more comfortable for the participants. It made the meeting very touching and momentous, and it was an important experience for us, and it taught us that in order to meet groups of immigrants, you need to be properly prepared in terms of the knowledge of the culture of a given country. Fortunately, Magda lives on the border with Ukraine and comes from a family with Ukrainian roots. So they found themselves in this situation very easily. It was an important signal for us on how to prepare for the next meetings. And the next implementation of listening hours was when in Poland we had the restrictions in Poland, they were a bit decreased, and they decided to conduct workshops for young people that live in a closed educational center for girls. As a principle, the workshops concerned the use of theatrical methods for integration and resocialization purposes. As always, in the work, in addition to theatrical and psychodrama techniques, they used the playback method. And this time they also introduced listening hours, but in a bit modified form. Girls in the educational center, they are locked up due to court sentences that are imposed on them. And they spend a couple of years in their lives isolated, and now, according to the situation, to the pandemic, they are, we can say, double isolated. So that's why Magda and Agata decided to initiate personal contact with them. They introduced listening hours as a warm-up before subsequent actions, and spontaneously told stories of the girls. They triggered others to say the word. As an effect, they led to the emergence of a topic for further work in groups during activities. It means that the idea of listening hours was a bit reversed, and it's not the topic that started the conversation, but it's relaxed conversation that emphasized the topic important for the group. The goal in such groups is not to make a direct therapy, but so it completely fulfilled expectations and goals of the project of the workshop created. Another space of using the listening hours method was and is especially important to Magda and Agata because it touches the topic of women's rights in Poland. That is why they decided to use other means available to them. They decided to combine listening hours with theatrical and film forms. Right before the social topic of the women's strike appeared in Poland, they prepared a performance related to femininity and its various aspects. They focused for the most on considering the myths about motherhood, and they worked in cooperation with authors of books about women and musicians. In this way, the performance entitled Mothers was created, and when the strikes spread it along Poland in connection with the ban on abortion of damaged fetuses, they adapted the performance to the social needs. So they made it right in time, and they get into the current social topic in Poland. But in their work, they tried not to comment on the current situation, but to provoke discussion. By moving the action exclusively they moved the action exclusively to the online space, and the film that you will see, or they will send you a link, was an introduction to the theater performance that they played later on live. Then came the listening hours part of this thing, and it was very difficult experience because such a strong and difficult stage and thematic material caused a lot of reflection. However, now we can talk about two particularly important aspects about which we previously were not aware. First, bringing a difficult topic to LH, to listening hours, causes individuals to take more time to open up. Thus, it puts a lot of responsibility on the facilitator and requires special precautions and sensitivity so that others feel comfortable when the meeting is over. It is important that emerging stories that may be difficult are summed up in a safe way for the storyteller and other people. The second equally important aspect is the fact that in reality, a person online online after turning off their computer remains alone in their world. So the conversation must end with a positive threat, giving them a relief. So Agata and Magda decided to implement listening hours in such a way because they have professional background of being psychotherapists, which gives them skills not always available to other presenters or implementers of this method. They professionally deal with the group and individual psychotherapy, which makes them sensitive to the needs of people experiencing difficult emotions. They believe that listening hours in the context of social problems requires particular vigilance and empathy from the instructors. They also believe that it is advisable to have more than one meeting with a given group so that there is some follow-up and an opportunity to complete the process. This has its consequences because then something like a support group is born, and it is no longer just a free exchange of stories, but a certain process and relations between the participants. The girls from the educational care center with whom they worked became a group that has been working together on other topics than the workshops since then. So it had positive effects. Um, Also, we have the ability to follow what is happening with them, and we feel very satisfied with our work. We know that the way we worked with the girls using listening hours contributed to the fact that they could get to know each other better and create a group in which there is trust. As for the show and listening hours, we also plan, Agata and Magda also plan to continue their work and analyze the further effects of mentioned activities. And that's all.
Great, great. Thank you. Thank you.
Poprosimy może jeszcze o włączenie filmu, to jest tylko minutka.
Okay, they also want to turn on the movie. It's just 1 minute. Yeah, the movie that
Sure.
was mentioned,
So,
like a short.
So,
yeah, okay.
So we will, I'm not sure exactly how long the movie is, but we will see maybe the first a minute of the movie. Is it?
It's just 1 minute.
Yeah. And then we will be able to hear everyone's questions and comments. So I will share the screen to show you the film that they're talking about that they showed in relation to their work with women and particularly, well, I don't need to sum it up. I hope you understood. Okay. So very short. Well, thank you. Thank you for the film, short as it was, very strong. And thank you for your work, everybody. And for Albert, the translation, your hard work. And so I hope you all were able to understand well enough. And let's just take some time for you to ask questions about any of the presentations, either Lebanon or Turkey or Poland. Who would like to ask a question? We have two screens of people present, so I will try to field these questions. And if I don't see you, try the chat and I can try to recognize you. But yes, Nika.
I found the film very strong and interesting, but I think I missed how listening hours was connected to it. If I could, yes.
I think the film comes before the listening hour. And one question that I have in relation to it is because you spoke about the importance of integrating such strong prompt, and also the subject is so sensitive. How long is your session? How long is your listening hour session? So that's a question for Agata.
Zrozumiałyście? Okej. Tak, czyli pytanie jest pierwsze, jak było później te listening hours były wprowadzane do projektu związanego z tym filmem, a też jak długo trwają sesje?
Sesja trwa godzinę, tak jak jest przewidziane, nie dłużej, także trwa godzinę. Natomiast to jest tak, że film był punktem wyjścia, czyli był jakby pierwszym punktem spotkania. Później było nasze działanie na żywo i później była godzina słuchania, czyli rozmowa z osobami, które uczestniczyły jako uczestnicy, tak, jako w rozmowie.
Okay. So the listening hours is 1 hour long, like I guess the regular time, and the movie that you have seen, this we can call it kind of like a trailer or starting point for the further actions. So after this movie, this short trailer, there was a live performance of a play called Mothers. There was a listening hour. Yeah, so it was all connected.
Okay. Let's have another question or comment. Yes, Aviva.
In the 3 presentations, I was dealing with very strong and deep stories and situations. I'm kind of asking, how do you take care of the impact or the closure or the safety of the tellers? And I did heard that Agata and Magda are, because they are coming from a professional background, they put a lot of attention, not only how they are trigger and bringing and opening the subject, but also how they are closing and taking care of the safety of the participants. So I am kind of asking, I'm not doing listening hour by now with my reasons, but one of the things that I'm really interested is how do you follow up and how do you hold it in a safe way?
Yes, so I think today, obviously, we can raise these questions. We're not going to have time to answer them really, except it's interesting that Shanice spoke about how amazing that there seemed to be closure, even in 1 hour, that there was very strong relief and people were ready. So we have kind of both situations. We have the listening hour being able to relieve people, even though it's so short. And on the other hand, the need for, as Magda and Agata said, more than one session. they said, you know, with these really complicated and sensitive subjects, better to have more than one session, if I understood.
And also, is it enough only to use the listening hour, or do you need other devices?
Really good question.
To do
Is
something.
the listening hour enough? Yes, Shanice.
Maybe I can give an example. Just one practice that I did with my face-to-face group before listening hour. I did movement and compassion exercise, and the group already knew each other and they can touch each other. Of course, because of pandemic. But we cannot touch each other. But with this group, we can touch each other, not so fast, and it helps. I guess it helps. Maybe 40 minutes, or I did movement and compassion exercises.
So you mean 40 minutes movement and compassion exercise, and then 1 hour listening hour, or?
Then listening hour.
Yeah.
First, movement and compassion exercise with body, and then listening hour.
Michael Cheng is asking about the difference between online and live listening hours that Abudi first mentioned, and Shanice also. Well, all of you have mentioned this. I feel it's a very important topic, and perhaps that will be the next theme for the next Milk and Cookies, live and online, because I think it's really interesting, and especially as the pandemic ends, the pandemic will end. And as the pandemic ends, then we will have more choices, many of us, whether to use listening hour live or online, as most of us have. I want to just ask one question to Abudi. You mentioned how the first person, if they started with the economic situation, or if they started with the explosion, then all the other stories very much followed that lead. And as someone else said in the chat, that happens in playback too. The first story in playback often suggests a theme, for a strong theme for the other stories. And in a situation of trauma, that could even be emphasized. And my question, Abudi, for you is it a problem? Do you feel that it's a problem that the first story sets such a strong pattern, or does it feel okay to you? I hope you understand my question.
Yes, I do. And no, it wasn't at all a problem, because I never had a theme for listening hour. And this is another question we might raise here, like an open question. Are we going to have a themed listening hour sessions? My sessions were all open for with no theme, so it wasn't bothering me. I didn't try it with a themed performance, but I think because I come from a playback background, even in playback performances, when we have a theme performance and stories shift outside that, depends on the need. Sometimes we keep the shift, sometimes we pull it back. It depends. There are many factors that play a role in this. But for me, it wasn't bothering at all. Actually, I found it easier because it creates a common ground with for the people. to speak about.
Yeah, great. And of course, there are many guides who are using the listening hour already with themes, you know, as well as open. So people are using the listening hour in both ways. So we have time for one or two more questions or comments. I want to stick to our 1 hour format with this milk and cookies also, because I know you're very busy. So of course there was a lot of material presented, and we're just kind of touching on some of the questions, but who else? Yes, Yoka, what would you like to ask?
Yeah, I want to ask, in the beginning you said the theme of tonight, or this morning for you, is listening hour in communities of crisis. And that's what I want to focus on. If you use listening hour in communities of crisis, then it's, according to me, there is a possibility, but also maybe a not so nice idea that it tends to therapy. Well, I think it's listening hour, it has its possibilities, but it's also limited. So how does the concept relate to the goal group? Do you understand what I mean?
I half understand what you mean. So you're saying that it could be a mistake, or it could be, well, you're a little bit wary of a focus for the listening hour on communities in crisis. Yes, because can the listening hour really handle traumatic situations? Yeah.
And also, what is a crisis? Because everyone is sometimes in a personal crisis, in a natural crisis, in an economical crisis, in a political crisis. So there are a lot of crises. And I think the listening hour has the possibility to share stories within 1 hour, and that's it.
Yes. Okay. So I want to make a comment about that, and then maybe we're going to have to wrap up. But Shanice spoke about the relief that people felt, and even about if you did it quickly enough after the crisis, while they were still in shock, it could be a relief. But we know from trauma studies that the timing is really important when you make an intervention. If you intervene too quickly, many would say, people aren't ready yet to narratize their experience. So the question of timing is really important. And it's just an open question. I think, you know, we have crises that many of us have been living through. You have systemic and ongoing crises that many of us live through. And what are the limitations of the listening hour, and what is the potential and the possibilities of the listening hour, and what is the ethics around this? I think these are very good and very important questions for us all to think about in the days and months ahead. So we're coming to the end of this session. I want to thank the presenters very much for their work. I know it's a lot of experience that I asked you to speak about in a very short time. And if it felt really too short to everybody, please send me feedback. Maybe we adjust the format. I don't know, we'll see. But it's great to hear about your work. And thank you all so much for coming. And somebody can take a photo. Maybe I can manage to take a photo. So we can share that with other people. Thank you, Andrea, for your translation. Thank you, Albert, for your hard work in translating. We didn't hear, we heard hardly anything from Magda and Agata directly, but you heard a little Polish, and this is good for your ears. Yes, just to hear the sound. So, bye-bye for now, everyone. Thanks for coming. Bye-bye.
Dziękuję bardzo.
O, dziękujemy bardzo.
Do widzenia.
Do
Thank
widzenia.
you very much.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
I lay under a tall oak tree, asked the tree to shelter me. She wrapped me up in an ancient green, ancient green. I lay under a tall oak tree, asked the tree to shelter me. She wrapped me up in an ancient green, ancient green. All my tears, all my tears, all my tears, rivers gonna wash away. All my tears, all my tears, all my tears, rivers gonna wash away. I lay under a tall oak tree, asked the tree to shelter me. She wrapped me up in an ancient green, ancient green. I lay under a tall oak tree, asked the tree to shelter